and welcome to Probable Causation, a show about law, economics, and crime. I'm your host, Jennifer Doliak of Texas A&M University, where I'm an economics professor and the director of the Justice Tech Lab. Today I'm talking with Adam Gelb, the president and CEO of the brand new Council on Criminal Justice. I'm on the council's board of trustees, so have gotten to participate in this new organization's launch, and I think the council's mission will be of interest to a lot of Probable Causation listeners. So I'm very excited to have Adam here today to talk about it. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Professor Doliak. It's terrific to be here with you on the show, and even more so to have you as part of the board of trustees of our new organization.
So why don't we start out talking a little bit about you? Can you tell folks what your background is in the criminal justice space?
I can try because I'm a bit of a rare bird in this field. I really have bounced around in it for almost 33 years now. I started my career as a reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution back in the 80s, really at the height of the drug war, and spent 5 years listening to the police scanner and making sure that the 11 o'clock TV news hadn't scooped me on something, but really had a long period of experience on the ground with police and prosecutors and medical examiners and everything that's involved in covering the police beat, and moved from there to Capitol Hill, then to grad school at the Kennedy School. I was one of a few people in the class actually concentrating crime control and justice. Back then everybody was interested in crime, but studying economics and business and government and health and transportation policy and these other things. But I had gravitated by then on account of what I had seen on the streets of Atlanta in 87, 88, 89, and 90, and so on, and to the criminal justice field. And I spent a year or more back on Capitol Hill in 94, right when the big federal crime bill was happening. I was on the Senate Judiciary staff and worked on the Violence Against Women Act and other provisions in that sprawling piece of legislation. Then I spent 5 years in the state of Maryland, working with the governor and lieutenant governor there on a whole set of crime control initiatives across the state. And then moved back here to Georgia, where I am now, to run the Sentencing Commission under Governor Barnes, and then ran a juvenile reentry program after Governor Barnes surprisingly lost that election in 2002, but ran a juvenile reentry program connecting kids coming out of the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice with treatment programs. And then for 12 years, Jennifer, I ran the criminal justice work at the Pew Charitable Trusts, which is a body of work that has become sort of known as the Justice Reinvestment Initiative. And we did a lot of things, research on national trends, highlighting the high cost and low public safety return of many current criminal justice policies. But really the core of our work was to help states figure out how to right-size their prison populations. And we worked with 35 states, many of them twice, many of them with adult and juvenile systems, on trying to figure out how to do a better job with fewer resources. And that's sort of all of that really, I think, in many ways culminated in the Council on Criminal Justice and the notion that I had gathered over the years of just how powerful it is to bring people with different perspectives together around issues, and how powerful it is when people who you would not normally think would agree about things actually do come together and agree about them.
Yeah, and so you've spent a lot of time talking with state and local officials and practitioners who are trying to make their criminal justice policies better, and you and I have talked a lot about how fun it is to work in a space where there is a lot of broad political interest in criminal justice reform. So there's a lot going on in this policy space right now. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about what the Council on Criminal Justice is and what the hole in the current landscape is that it's designed to fill?
Sure. The council is going to have the expertise. We do have the expertise with you and others who are part of our leadership, and the credibility and the mandate to really serve as a center of gravity for the field and an ongoing forum for the kind of consensus building that I was talking about across all stakeholders and perspectives. And that's really something our field doesn't currently have. There are a lot of organizations that are doing absolutely incredible work to improve safety and justice. But to varying degrees, they don't necessarily have the access to or the standing with policymakers that the council is designed to have. And so, right, definitionally, what the council is really a two-part organization. One is invitational membership piece, and the second is think tank. And the first part is a little bit sort of uncommon, certainly in criminal justice. I think it's unique in the criminal justice arena, where we have lots of professional associations, whether it's prosecutors associations or corrections associations or defenders. This is one that both pulls together all of those different sectors and beyond, including, of course, research and academia. And is also selective and says that we really are looking to create an organization of the top thinkers and doers, the most innovative and creative people in the field who've had impact and who have potential for impact in the years down the road on the field, and create that true crossroads for people to come together and build relationships across the different ideologies and sectors of the field, and really sort of sustain the momentum of the moment we're in. I think we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that's the membership piece of it in a nutshell. The think tank piece, I think we'll be doing the kind of things that you'd expect from a think tank, both original research and synthesizing research, and helping really translate what is being produced by the field for policymakers. And I think for you and your listeners, that heavily is going to include the economics and cost benefit pieces of this. There's a tremendous amount of work that you and others are doing in the field that needs and really deserves a broader audience with people who are in decision-making positions, whether they are elected officials or appointed officials running corrections or policing law enforcement agencies, the courts, and so on. And so we think we have an ability to serve as a really credible and trustworthy, honest broker of those kinds of information to policymakers, and a place that they can come to trust. For me, the most exciting thing about the council is the combination of those two pieces, the invitational membership piece and the think tank. And that is that one of the most common things, and I hope impactful things that we will do, is to form task forces of members and ask them to put their heads together around what the research says about a particular problem, and to fashion policy recommendations and solutions. And our theory is, and I think we've seen this in other fields, that when you have a diverse group of stakeholders come together and say, we've taken a look at the research, and this is where we think policy ought to move, and those people are among the more well-regarded, credible people with stature in the field, that people will listen and take those recommendations and act on them.
So it is a very diverse set of members. Do you want to give some examples of some of this diversity?
Sure. And it was just really wonderful as we started off on this last year. It's been less than a year that we've been up and running, but to get the kind of response that we have gotten from all sectors of the field, and some really fabulous people So we have a board of directors, and that is our governing board that has legal and fiduciary responsibility for the organization, and people who have the time and the ability to help us roll up their sleeves and build this new thing. And that includes people like Roy Austin, who was on President Obama's White House Domestic Policy Council staff, as a former U.S. attorney. Includes Flozell Daniels, who is the CEO of the Foundation for Louisiana, and has been just a central player in all of the criminal justice reforms over the past many years in in that state. Includes Timothy Head, who is is executive director of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Gil Kurlikowski, who was police chief in Buffalo and Seattle, and was the drug czar also under President Obama. Our board of directors chair is a woman named Lori Robinson, who is probably familiar to many of your listeners. Lori is someone who, for a total of 10 years, was the assistant attorney general in charge of the Office of Justice Programs at DOJ, and therefore knows probably more people across the country in the criminal justice field, from law enforcement to courts to corrections and advocacy, than anyone. And so is really just the kind of perfect person to help pull together and identify the right people who are participate in this organization. People who are not committed necessarily to any particular policy agenda at all, but although many of them are, but to come together as part of a council that says we are about facts and data and fundamental principles of justice, whether you're on the right or left of the political spectrum, and so on. You obviously are part of our board of trustees, which is our advisory board, and that is a group of really talented and amazing people as well. That board is chaired by former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates and Mark Holden, Senior Vice President of Koch Industries, which obviously is a pairing that we think demonstrates that commitment to facts and evidence and fundamental principles of justice, despite differences that exist on many other levels of policy and politics. It also includes Senator Mike Lee from Utah. It includes DeRay McKesson, who was a co-founder of Campaign Zero, and then many people from across the criminal justice system, from policing to courts. We have strong representation from California, including former Governor Jerry Brown and the Chief Justice of California, and so on. So we're really pleased with the depth and the breadth and the diversity of the perspectives that are part of our governing board and the advisory board of trustees.
And so part of the goal, I think, is just getting all these people in the room together to talk to each other. But I gather part of the goal is also to reach consensus on some tough policy issues. To what extent do you think that's possible?
I think it is more possible today than it has been in a generation. It is really stunning how far this issue has come. It really used to be one of the most divisive issues in American politics, perhaps not as much as abortion or some gun control issues, but it really used to be the wedge issue that the parties tore each other apart with. And for a whole set of reasons, which we can talk about if you'd like, that has transformed into a very different, unrecognizable situation where the ground is really fertile for bipartisan agreement. And I think we've seen that in the 35 or so states now, I think pushing closer to 40 states that have passed some type of criminal justice reforms. And certainly at the federal level, with the passage in late 2018 just over a year or so ago now, of the First Step Act. Also just stunning if you're a football fan to have watched the Super Bowl the other night and to see that the two presidential campaigns that took out those horrendously expensive ads during the Super Bowl, both of them spoke to criminal justice issues. And I think there are a lot of suspicions on both sides, as there are always going to be in a situation like that. What are the real intent behind those messages? But I think at the very least we can say that the notion that the candidates think that voters want to hear and take the opportunity, one of the biggest audiences you can have, to speak to criminal justice issues, suggests or supports the notion that we are in a very special time for this issue, and that it's critical for us to take as much advantage of it as possible.
So why do you think we're in this special moment? What led you to leave your very nice job at Pew, doing good work there, to start up this new organization? And why do you think that there's the potential for this group of people to be able to make a difference in this way?
Yeah, I think there are really three things that underlie this. The first is the success and progress in the states. The second is changes in public opinion. And the third is research. So let's take each one of those in turn. The first, with respect to success in the states, it used to be, I don't know if anybody called this, economists always have great names for things. I don't know if anybody put a name on this, but I would call it sort of the iron law of prisons and crime. It really used to be an article of faith, which is that there was an inverse relationship here, and that if prisons went up, then crime would go down, and vice versa. And so that, among other things, but that was certainly the driving policy notion behind the run-up of the prison population in the 70s and the 80s and through the 90s. And then in 2007, the state of Texas, where you're based now, really just slammed the brakes on that. It was originally from a fiscal perspective, where the head of the Texas House just said, we're not going to build any prisons anymore. They cost too much. Let's figure out something else. And they just said no to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, which was coming in and saying we need to spend $2 or $3 billion more on 14 to 17,000 more prison cells over the next 5 years, and said instead we're going to spend a tiny fraction of that on various alternative programs. And that's what they did. The prison population stopped growing. And obviously, Texas being a fast-growing state, that meant the incarceration rate really started to drop. And lo and behold, the crime rate did as well. And within a few years, there was a handful of other states that were thinking about this and talking about it at the same time, including South Carolina in 2009 and 2010. But within about 3 years, you had a situation where both crime and incarceration were falling, and they were falling in tandem in states that had scaled back their incarceration rates and had passed policies, started new programs designed to steer lower level offenders from prison into alternatives. And so that really, I think, started to create momentum, even if conservatives and liberals come at this still from different destinations and take different routes. They're getting to the same destination, which is to say, if you're fiscally conservatives, just say I don't want to spend money and I don't trust big government programs, and prisons are a big government program just like anything else. You can come at it from that perspective, or you can say we need reform because of social, economic, and racial justice issues. Both of those routes take you to saying we should be steering people away from prison who don't need to be there for public safety reasons. And so that's number one. Number two is the public really had, frankly, gotten sick and tired of increasing prisons and increasing prison costs, and increasingly aware that we were not going to build our way to public safety. It's a little bit hard to say this because I think that the conventional wisdom is that there was a big shift in public opinion. And I'm not sure that that's the case. When you look back at polling, even back in the 80s and 90s at the height of the drug war, uh, and I certainly saw this on the ground as a reporter, there were high levels of support for alternatives, the proverbial quote unquote alternatives to incarceration for lower level offenders, particularly drug offenders, drug involved offenders. And then so when you flash forward to 2010, 2012 or so in there, you still find those high levels of support. They're higher, but it's not a situation where it shifted from opposition to support. I think it's a support essentially intensified for that. And that in turn was, I think, reinforced by some of the terrible interactions between police and citizens, whether it was Michael Brown situation in Ferguson, or some of the other cases that really galvanized public opinion and opposition, and did wake people up to not only should we have more alternatives for lower level offenders, but we have a system here that is just simply not producing anywhere near enough safety or justice, and particularly for people who are poor and of color. And the last thing is the research piece, and as much as I think those two first developments are incredibly important, I think the third one is really foundational here, and that is the development of a body of evidence that points to things that are effective. By effective, I don't mean they work all the time, or that they work for everybody, but to a series of practices and programs that that actually do help bend the curve on recidivism. And if you do these things well, you do them right, they're strongly implemented, then you can start to see reductions of 30% or more in recidivism rates. And I think, and really know from our experience across the country in red states and blue states alike, that when you're able to shift from the nothing works ethic of the 70s, you got to lock them up because we don't know how to change behavior, to the last several years now, there is a growing recognition among policymakers that there are things that in fact work. They work fairly well, and that if we do them right, we can achieve more public safety at lower cost.
So there are a lot of things you could potentially do with this organization. The council had its big inaugural event in Washington, D.C. this past fall. So you're still in early days. What are the main priorities for you as the council kind of kicks off its being here and establishes itself as a player in this space? What do you see as the main goals for the first year?
Yeah, I think we have two chief goals for this year. One is to build out the membership, which we're in the process of doing right now. So it's a wonderful process that we're engaged in to scour across the country for roughly 150 people to add to you and the others who are serving on our boards, and really put together an incredibly powerful, strong group of people, and start to build their commitment to this organization and this type of bipartisan, data-driven approach. We're also going to be making sure that we include directly impacted people. And to me, directly impacted means both people who have been in prison and are under parole probation supervision, the millions of people who have been affected in that way, as well as the people who work in the system itself. These both sides of the equation have been so overlooked in in policy conversations over the years, and they really need to be brought to the center of that conversation. I think it's a real central constituency for the council as an organization. These are the people whose lives are most directly affected by the system, and the people running it and studying it and writing about it have got to incorporate their experiences and their suggestions into their work. And by creating an ongoing forum like the council and opportunities for directly impacted people and victims to interact with and build relationships with policymakers in Washington and state capitals, I think we're helping to build the proximity that's needed if we're going to make the best decisions about how to improve the system. And then the second is to get out our first policy pieces. The first of those is going to be coming out of our federal priorities task force. That is the first one we've put together. It's chaired by former Georgia Governor Nathan Deal, who was one of the most conservative governors in the country, but as you well know, led 6 uninterrupted years of criminal justice reform here in Georgia. And it also includes our trustee co-chairs, Sally Yates and Mark Holden, and a bunch of other terrific people. And they are nearing consensus on a broad set of about 15 recommendations for what are the next steps that the federal government should be taking coming out of the First Step Act, and not just with respect to federal sentencing, but the group is talking about changes in Medicaid and housing and some other pieces here. But what are the most important politically viable things that the federal government should be doing next? And so we're looking to finish that up and get that released and to start to build some support for seeing those things happen. I don't think any of us are thinking that in an election year a whole lot of aggressive policy on this front is going to get done or through the Senate, but I think we all felt like the time was right to take a look at what those things ought to be and to start laying that groundwork. The second piece is a compilation of policies and practices that ought to stop. And we're well aware that good intentions are not good enough. And there's a lot of policy out there and a lot of programs and practices that are quite common, despite what is now a fairly robust set of studies that show that they're not effective. And in some cases, worse than not effective, they're criminogenic and make things worse. And so we're in the process of doing a review of the literature there, which of course includes a number of the pieces that you have produced, particularly around Ban the Box and other items, and are excited about pulling together a list of things that we really do hope will have some impact in the field and provide cover to some practitioners and policymakers who are just kind of chugging along with things because that's the way they've always been done, but really do need to stop happening. So those we got a number of other irons in the fire, but we very much believe that we're getting to a point now where we're going to have the membership and have the team together that can put out pieces that really drive the national conversation in very productive and helpful ways.
So we have a lot of listeners who are academic researchers or students, both college and graduate students. We also have listeners who are criminal justice practitioners. Are there ways for each of these groups to get involved in the council if they're interested in contributing in some way?
There certainly will be, and as you said, we are in early days, and there will be a lot more to come on this. But in the first instance, since we're just about to get this top 10 things to stop doing off the ground, boy, we'd love to hear nominations from your listeners. Mm-hmm. Maybe they could be in contact with you. They could send them to us at info@counciloncj.org. But very interested to sort of put together the broadest possible list of candidates for that, and then really wrestle with the ones that should come out on top and really have that light shined on them. There also fairly soon, and at some point this year, we're going to be starting an organizational membership program. As I described earlier, sort of the people who are selected for individual membership are people who've demonstrated that track record of accomplishment and achievement in the field and the potential for leadership in the field going forward. But no, that can't begin to include everybody who's making a real difference in the field. And so we'll be building out an organizational membership piece as well that hopefully we'll be able to expose a broader set of people to people who are council leaders and members, and create various events and other opportunities for networking and knowledge building among them.
Where can listeners learn more about the Council on Criminal Justice and get updates on events and publications if they are interested?
Right. Our website is counciloncj.org. We tweet at Council on CJ, and I'm happy to talk with anybody about this. And you can send a note to info@counciloncj.org, or you can talk with your host here, since among the 1,000 things you already do, you somehow have made time to engage with us. And I would sort of also further suggest, both generally and specifically, that listeners go to our website at counciloncj.org and look at some of the sessions that occurred at our first convening last year, actually just a few months ago in October. And I think you'll see there some of the kinds of conversations, the honest, candid conversations that need to happen in this field. I was talking before about, frankly, a lot of kumbaya, and there is a lot of kumbaya, but there's still some very deep divisions and disagreements about things, particularly as we move from talking about lower level offenders to people with more serious offenses, longer sentences, and a whole host of other issues around police use of force and so on. And so in order to make progress at that deeper level, we need this kind of forum, and I think that is illustrated quite well by a number of the conversations that happened at that summit, including the one that you had, Jennifer, with Diane Williams on stage around what does the research really tell us about what's effective at reducing recidivism.
Thank you so much for being here, Adam. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me, for being part of our organization, and for your putting the economist's lens on these critical criminal justice issues.
You can find links to all the research we discussed today on our website, probablecausation.com. You can also subscribe to the show there or wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Big thanks to Emergent Ventures for supporting the show, and thanks also to our Patreon subscribers. This show is listener supported, so if you enjoy the podcast, then please consider contributing via Patreon. You can find a link on our website. Our sound engineer is Carolyn Hockenberry, with production assistance from Elizabeth Pancotti. Our music is by Werner, and our logo is designed by Carrie Throckmorton. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.